Welcome everyone to our free October online peer mediation platform webinar. And I am so pleased tonight to have a really dear friend with me who will be co-hosting, and I'll let her introduce herself in a moment. So just a couple of things before we begin our webinar. We'll probably have a couple of people joining us, so you'll hear a bell from time to time. We are recording this webinar, so if you're watching by recording, thank you so much for joining us, even though you couldn't be here in person. We just really appreciate this. Please send this video out. It is free to view by anybody. You can send it to anyone you wish. So I just wanted to kind of let you know that before we got started. So without further ado, Darcy and I are going to get started. Darcy, do you see a PowerPoint?
I do.
Awesome. Okay. So our webinar tonight is before and after the active shooter drill, peer mediation and conflict resolution. So you might wonder, what does peer mediation have to do with an active shooter drill? Well, Darcy and I are going to tell you what it has to do with a active shooter drill. So we're going to talk a little first about OPMP. This is our host. We actually are a real entity. We are a nonprofit. We do a lot of training and a lot of peer mediation work with students. So the online peer mediation platform is, again, it was, let me get to that slide. Here's our team. Let me not jump ahead of myself. Here's our team. We're actually managed by about 8 or 9 people who make up a team, and we all come from different backgrounds, and we all do different things. We conduct trainings, we host these webinars, we work with students. So if you want to know more about us, I'll show you our website in just a moment. Just a very brief history about OPMP. We were funded by a grant by the JAMS Foundation. That's Judges, Arbitrators, and Mediators. We were managed by the Association for Conflict Resolution in 2015, and then we are now managed by the National Association of Peer Program Professionals, which certifies peer programs in the United States and abroad. So just a little bit about us. Here's our website. www.peermediationonline.org. If you go there, you will find a lot of stuff, and I'm just going to cover just very briefly what the online peer mediation platform covers. We also have a monthly blog. Well, actually, we do a little bit more than monthly. We have videos, peer mediation simulations. Our webinars are on here, and you can contact us for more information if you're interested in any of our services. So there are 4 goals to the online peer mediation platform. Free resources. We offer free resources for anyone that is considering a peer mediation program. We also develop 10 modules where anyone, high school, middle school, can put their students on to enhance their mediation skills or start with basic peer mediation conflict resolution skills. We do role play practice with students that already are in peer mediation, because we find that a lot of our students don't have enough time to practice. So we can provide an avenue for you to actually practice online, your students that is, and then they get a copy of that video. Okay, that's great, because then you can show them what they did well, what they could have changed, and this great dialogue. And then last, this is our big goal that we have in the future, is that we will provide online peer mediation services for schools that actually do not have a peer mediation program, and that is something we would like to do in the future. So we work from elementary to college. We do have some other things in the works. I won't go into those tonight. That's another webinar. But we are also looking for partners. Okay, so if you're interested in maybe partnering with us, if you have a school, if you're a mediation trainer, if you're a college professor watching this, we definitely would love for you to reach out to us and see how we can partner together. Okay, well, that's enough about us. Let's go to our presenters for tonight. So I am going to let Darcy introduce herself, and then I'll talk a little bit more about myself. Darcy?
Okay, so my name is Darcy Thompson. I am a retired educator. I spent about 30 years in public schools, teaching, and then serving as an educational diagnostician doing training. Retired, and now I am a Texas credentialed advanced mediator and continue, of course, to be an educational diagnostician. But a big focus of my time in the industry now is on peer mediator education. So, and I will pass it to Cindy.
Thank you, Darcy. So I'm Cynthia Morton. I am the one of the co-coordinators for the online peer mediation platform. But I work in the schools, and I run a countywide peer mediation program. I've been a peer mediation coordinator, trainer for many years. I was on the education, research, and training section for the Association for Conflict Resolution. I'm the past president of Georgia ACR. So Darcy and I both have vast experiences with peer mediation and peer mediation programs, what's good, what's not so good. We kind of deal with it all. And Darcy and I met, oh gosh, how long ago has it been now, Darcy?
Maybe a year?
Maybe a year. Yeah, we met about a year ago, and we just really hit it off. And so Darcy brought this idea about a webinar, or really about an article. So I'm going to let Darcy tell us a little bit about the purpose of today's webinar. So Darcy?
Okay, so let's take a look at the agenda for today. We will talk a little bit about the history of school safety, and then we're going to really focus on action. So we want to hear from parents, from students, of what they see, what's important to them, what issues they are seeing, and what they think needs to happen. And then we'll go into some critical pieces of preventing school violence, building a positive school climate. One of the critical pieces of that is having a peer mediation program. And then we have a call to action today that we'll talk about in a little bit later, and then we'll share some resources with you. So I think Cindy mentioned earlier that this webinar was based on an article about, I want to say a few months ago. I was approached about submitting an article to our state journal for mediators, the Texas Mediator. And in thinking about it, Cindy and I kind of collaborated and thought about what's going on. And very much we felt like an important topic to talk about was school safety. And so the title that we chose was Before and After the Active Shooter Drill, Peer Mediation and Conflict Resolution. It focuses on school safety and efforts that are being used that are more common, and some recommendations for some efforts that may be more effective, and also looking at underlying issues, not just reacting to the problem. I have gotten to the second one, and some of those common preventative efforts are focused on metal detectors. A lot of the schools now have resource officers, sometimes armed, sometimes not, or they have police officers. But what are they doing to address the problem before it gets to that explosive or violent stage? So that's when we start talking about, do we have ways for students to do peaceful conflict resolution, such as peer mediation? Today, we'll discuss how to foster a positive school climate, encourage student leadership, and involve youth in peacefully resolving their own conflicts. They have really spoken up and have a voice, and I'm so excited that we have one of those students with us today. And she may share some things with us, or she may not, but I've interviewed her as well as some other students, and so we'll share that.
Awesome.
I'm going to let Cindy.
Okay. Well, before we get started, we're going to briefly, and when I say brief, I mean like this could be a whole nother webinar, okay? But we're going to briefly just talk about the history of school shootings in the U.S. and about school shootings today. So, as we know, back when Darcy and I were in school, Darcy, did you worry about a school shooting?
Absolutely not. I was carefree and just unaware of any of that kind of
Activity went on. Absolutely. Now, that doesn't mean there weren't school shootings when Darcy and I were in high school or elementary or middle. It just means that we were unconsciously unaware that they were going on. So
Can I interrupt
therefore,
you?
pardon?
Let me interrupt you for a minute and
Absolutely.
ask Cheryl, you had a daughter who was in school a little bit later than we were. So Cheryl is also participating. If you can just take a
Hey,
few.
Cheryl.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. I had a daughter who was in school, in high school back in 2001 in the city of New Orleans. And in as much as we didn't worry about safety that much, as I reflect on it and think about it, there was very little security in her school. There were 3 open gates that surrounded the patio to the school. And people came in and out at will. And it wasn't until an incident happened to one of the students at home that focused the school to beef up their security. One of the students caught a burglar in her home. She was a latchkey kid, walked in, caught a burglar. The burglar hit her with a brass lamp and it maimed her for life. And so after that, it made the school kind of think about what types of steps do we need to take in our own school to prevent such a thing from happening. And her school, I failed to mention, was located on a college campus, the campus of University of New Orleans, but it had its own facility in and of itself. So the parking lot was open, everything was open, and it was very interesting and very scary as a parent to think about that.
Thank you, Cheryl, for sharing that.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Absolutely. So again, even as late as 2001, as Cheryl was telling us, people were really not thinking about, violence in schools. So that kind of changed. And we know now that that's part of our culture. We've even had people say, oh, that's just part of the norm. You'll hear that often stated. So this is just a brief look at school shootings in America by year. And it looks like 2014 there was a peak in school shootings. Now, let me say, when we look at this graph, no, we're not just looking at elementary, middle schools, and high schools. We're also looking at technical schools and colleges. Okay? So you have to take that in consideration when you're looking at that graph. So there was a study that was published by the the Journal of Child and Family Studies, that found that more people have died or been injured in mass school shootings in the past 18 years than in the entire 20th century. So when someone goes to do this, they're really wanting to take lives, as many lives as possible. So we know that that's kind of the aim now of people who have these tendencies to be very violent, is that they want to take out as many people as possible. So it's good that we are being safe. I am totally for school safety. I think it's very important. I don't think sometimes kids are really aware of how vulnerable they are. So it's good that we practice with them. But I also want to define this term mass shooting, because that's something that's kind of not really a new term, but a new thought. But anytime 4 or more people are killed, excluding the shooter, that is considered a mass shooting. And so when we look at school violence trends, there's a quote I want to share from the study. In the last 18 years, we have already seen more deaths related to school shootings than in the whole 20th century. One alarming trend is that the overwhelming majority of 21st century shooters were adolescents, suggesting that it's easier for them to access guns, and they more frequently suffer from mental health issues or limited conflict resolution skills. So we're not talking about the mental health part. That's a whole nother issue. But what Darcy and I are going to be talking about tonight is addressing the limited conflict resolution skills. So are school shootings new? No, they're not. I would like to say they are, but they're not. They're not a 21st century phenomenon. In fact, school shootings started as early as the 1700s. And in the 1800s, there was a rash of school shootings. And then it's just not white males that does it. So we have to look at, there are other people. So there's two incidents I want to point out to you. In 1940, there was actually a high school principal that went on a shooting rampage and killed 6 adults. So I know there's this whole thing about, and I'm not being political or anything, there's this whole thing about arming, school personnel. But here's another interesting point. There were no mass shootings in the 50s and 60s. So it's been cyclical, that's another thing to think about. And it's just not males, because in the 1970s, I think it was 1979, a female decided to take her father's shotgun and shoot into the elementary school playground that was across from her apartment building, and she killed 2 people and injured 9. And she said the reason she did it, they asked her, and she said, "I hate Mondays." So, yeah, so some interesting dynamics when it comes to talking about school shootings. So, okay, people that are on this webinar tonight, you have a chat box. I have a question for you. Will you type in your chat box if you believe that school violence is on the rise? So let's see what you think. If you can't find the chat box, or, that's, you can always unmute yourself too, so it's okay. Anybody want to? Oh, okay. So I got one. Yes. Thank you. Okay. So someone said absolutely. Okay. And then someone else said yes. Okay. All righty. Well, let's look at and see what the research says, because I was with you guys. I'm like, absolutely. School violence is on the rise, So here's what, go ahead, Darcy.
May I say
Absolutely.
something? So when we first were looking at doing an article, that was a thesis statement or a hypothesis that school violence was really on the rise. Mm-hmm. But when we started looking at the research, and I'll pass it to you.
Okay, when we started looking at the research, we were shocked. So according to a study published by Northeastern University professor Alan Fox, he said that schools, they found in their research that schools are actually safer today than they were back when we were there, because I think Cheryl said it best. There were no SROs, there were no bells to ring in, there were no locked doors. People could come in and out, in and out, in and out. So, in fact, there were more multiple violent shootings in the 1990s. Now, granted, when people come out to shoot, they're killing people, okay? But there were more multiple victim shootings in the 90s than there have been today. And the reason why people are hyper, focused on this is because of social media. Social media, you get your camera out and it's 24/7, weeks, months, and it's playing over and over and over. So it's got into our conscious now that, hey, this is normal, that school violence is on the rise, those kind of things. So remember when we looked at that chart in the 90s, from the 90s to the 2000 something, what was that, 17? That includes technical schools and colleges. So when we look at schools, we are now, when they say school, they're also including technical schools and colleges, not just high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools. And I hope that makes sense. But over here in the corner, I don't know if you can see that, I found a article from USA Today. And according to Every Town, which is guns, Everytown for Gun Safety, they reported there have been 290 school shootings since the Newtown massacre more than 5 years ago. However, very few of these were anything like Sandy Hook or Parkland. And again, they involve technical schools and colleges, as well as homicides like domestic, when someone has shot themselves. So when we say school shooting now, it's encompassing every type of shooting that you can think of. A shooting outside in your neighborhood from across from the school, or one that happened down the road from, if it's near a school. Now they're talking about any type of accidental discharge of a gun, whether someone is injured or not. So I want you to understand that when we're talking about statistics now in school shootings, that we're encompassing all that information. So here's one other thing I want to put out before Darcy takes over. Since whereas 5 of these incidents have occurred over the past 5+ years since 2013, claiming the lives of 27 victims and 17 were at Parkland, the latter half of the 1990s witnessed 7 multiple fatality shootings with a total of 33 killed. So that's why the statistics said there was more multiple victim shootings in the 90s. Okay, so I just wanted, that was shocking to me, because I was also under the impression that we're doomed. Darcy?
Okay, so I told you, one of the things that we found to be very important is what students and parents have to say about what's going on and what issues they see or they don't see. So I'm very happy to say that Olivia has joined us for this webinar, and I want to invite Olivia to speak up. I think you have your mom's computer that has audio, and if you want to interject or share something, please feel free to do so. So Olivia is a journalism student. She's a senior in high school in New Jersey. Olivia and her fellow students were so concerned about the school shooting in Parkland, Florida, that they staged a walkout with 200 of their classmates. Parkland, there were 17 lives lost due to the violence, and that has been repeated in Santa Fe. And so when we hear about this, of course, we look at, are the kids really having a big fear of, is this going to happen to me? Will this happen at my school? And so I interviewed Olivia. Oh, good. I didn't know my notes would be showing. Okay. Okay.
Do you want me to do a different share? Would that be better?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
It's fine. So when I interviewed Olivia, I asked about her impressions on conflict and school safety at her high school. And so I want to share some of her thoughts. And like I said, Olivia, feel free to join in. Really, Olivia said that conflict generally falls into the categories of students who are in different political parties, or their parents and their families have different political views, gossip and drama, and I'm going to come back to the word drama in a minute, or bullying, and that's mostly on social media, not so much in person. The he said, she said, that's been going on for years, but the he said, she said kind of thing has been, or teasing about what a student is wearing, that seems to be one of the major sources of disagreement. I asked about whether or not teachers and staff seem to be aware of what's going on with students, and Olivia said that she thought that they might be, because they may hear stuff and they may see stuff, but she didn't really notice that teachers really got involved with those issues. Yeah. Students that she had observed and maybe talked to, they had access to guidance counselors. They have guidance counselors at the school that are available, but many of them might be embarrassed to kind of talk to teacher or staff member or guidance counselor and might prefer to talk to a friend. So, Olivia, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
That basically covers most of it. The kids definitely have access to a guidance counselor, but yeah, I definitely feel like it would make kids feel really awkward to go out of their way and talk to like, a teacher or parent. And I definitely think like peer mediation would definitely be helpful for students in all high schools because it's like talking to a friend or talking to someone that like, and they can understand and relate better. And like, I think that would definitely um, be a better source, especially with all the bullying going on. And I always hear that on the news they say the school shooter was bullied and all these things. So maybe I'm not saying that it could prevent it, but like if peer mediation was a thing that was really out there, like it could help a situation like this from escalating to something so severe.
So again, and I've told Olivia this many times, she is so insightful. Yes, one of the things that we will be talking about is, although, and we'll talk about it more in depth later, peer mediation is not how you handle a bullying situation. Peer mediation and getting children and young people to learn how to talk to one another to resolve their problems is a way to prevent it getting from the place where it leads or it escalates into bullying. So again, you amaze me. You're such a phenomenal young lady with such insight. So thank you. Anything else?
That's it for now. This basically covered most of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia.
Thank you.
And I appreciate your participation. She's written some articles. She's done a lot at her school. So I applaud all of her peacemaking efforts and her leadership skills. I also spoke, now Olivia is in New Jersey and she's a senior. I also spoke to Kyle, and Kyle is a 10th grader in Texas. He's out in a suburban school district in Texas. And he said that at his school, there was not a lot of conflict, but again, he used the word drama. The conflict that he does observe seems to fall into the category of drama based on maybe inaccurate first impressions, mostly among the girls. He said not so much the boys. And he also endorsed that he said, she said is a primary source of disagreements. So at his school, he said bullying is absolutely not tolerated by the staff or the students. If they see something, they will go up to that student and interrupt that. They, teachers and the staff may not be aware of what's going on with the students' issues, maybe their issues at school or at home, but that they are very accommodating. If a student says that they have a problem, they will let the student leave class and go speak with the counselor so they feel like they're supported. Some of the school safety measures that are in place at Kyle's school are student IDs, and Olivia also said that they had IDs, and station in place, which are like the lockdown drills that Olivia has at her schools. And both Olivia and Kyle shared though, for the most part though, students didn't really seem that concerned about a school shooting, and they didn't take those drills very seriously. They weren't seemingly very worried that this was something that might happen at my school. Mm-hmm. One of the things I asked both Olivia and Kyle about whether or not they had a peer mediation program at their school. Olivia did not think that she had one. Kyle said he thought they might have one, although he hadn't heard of peer mediation. But what he actually talked about is the team leadership class that he has. And it's not a one-on-one to deal with individual problems, but it's kind of an ongoing class. I asked him, is it a small class? Is it just a few students that were selected? But it sounds, when I asked him to compare it to like geometry, because he's a 10th grader, he says there are probably more kids in that class than in geometry. So a fair amount of kids are apparently in the team leadership class. but they actually practice talking to one another, learning about one another, learn about differences. And so they have some breakouts where they talk one-on-one to each other, but they have a lot of large group things. So there are some things that schools are doing.
Very nice.
Okay, so when they look at some of the data online, it says what I think many people suspect, and that is a majority of students, maybe around 68%, experience some drama. They may not be the ones who are initiating it. They may be witnessing it. They might be the targets, or they might be the person who is initiating it. But about 68% of them said yes, that they experienced some drama. The other thing that was interesting to me was Pew did some research, and they said that the term drama is often the term that students use instead of the term bullying. And so I noted that both Olivia and Kyle use the term drama, not so much bullying. And so for a lot of students, drama is, it may have what we consider some characteristics of bullying, or it may not. But for students, they might define bullying at a different level or escalation. Okay.
Very interesting. We also looked at the comments from parents who had students that were at Parkland and at Sandy Hook. And we looked at some of their comments on social media. One of the there were two different type of messages that I saw that came from parents. Not that they were wrong or right, no judgment. But one parent focused more on the school safety. For instance, he said it shouldn't be so easy to walk into a school with a gun, which I agree. Judges are safe in their courthouses, and politicians are safe inside federal buildings. Children and teachers need to be safe in the classroom. So you have parents that will focus more on the school safety part of it, and then you'll have some parents that will focus more on the social emotional part of students. This was an open letter that was written from the parents of Sandy Hook to the teachers around the country. And they said, your courage will support students who are left out and overlooked, like the isolated young man who killed my daughter. At some point, he was a young, impressionable student, often sitting all alone at school. You will have kids facing long odds for whom your smile, your encouraging word, and your willingness to go the extra mile will provide the comfort and security they need to try again tomorrow. So Darcy and I are not going to focus on the school safety aspect. What we're going to focus on is more of the social emotional aspect. And so we're going to talk a little bit about, well, where does this violent behavior come from, and what are some of the causes of school violence? Here's one thing that we found when we wrote our article, is that people just don't come up and become violent. I mean, you'll hear it on the news. Oh, out of the blue, they came up and they just brought a gun to school. No, it really occurs way before they do the violent act. Okay, so it's really an evolutionary type path to get to violence, and it's step by step. I mean, there's something called the violence continuum, that you start out with an eye roll and you go all the way up to homicide. Okay, if you people that are in peer mediation training, they kind of know about the violence continuum, that if we don't handle it at a lower level, it will continue to escalate. Some other things that we found out in our research, this is quoted from Rita Cantrell Schillenberg. She's a school counselor who wrote her doctoral dissertation on school violence, and she suggested that if we really want to find where violence begins, it begins in middle childhood, and that is late elementary and middle school. And if we can zone in on that age and teach them the skills that they need, that maybe I'm not saying everybody, because that's not the case, we know that, we know they're sociopaths, but the majority of these students could have been saved from themselves, and it would have saved many lives. So again, it's during this period of development that they learn how to talk to each other, They learn either negative or positive behaviors. They develop patterns of how they're going to react to conflict, and they begin to create their mindsets about people and the world, and do we trust people, do we not trust people. So really and truly, this is the power here. This is where the social emotional learning piece really fits in. We also found in our research that a very small number of bullied children will retaliate. We know that many of the people that have been school shooters were bullied. In fact, if you look at the statistics, 12 out of 15 school shooting cases in the 90s, the shooter had a history of being bullied, and almost 30% or 5.7 million of youth in the United States are either bullied or the target of bullying. So even though we, like Darcy said, peer mediation will not handle bullying cases, it will teach students how to communicate and how to interact with peers when we teach them conflict resolution skills, and they have processes for handling their conflicts early. So I'm going to hand this back over to Darcy.
Okay, and I'm just going to comment and say again, thank you, Olivia, for having the insight to know we were going to get to that, because you're absolutely right about that. Bullied students are part of the problem when it comes to escalating violence. So let's talk about how we prevent or reduce violence in our school. So some of the common things, and I think Kyle and Olivia both talked about it, is many schools have what is sometimes called active shooter drills. That's where that title of the article came from. Active shooter drills, sometimes they're called lockdown or station in place, but students are taught how to hide, how to cover themselves, or make themselves as inconspicuous as possible, and then about being quiet. So there's quite a bit of that, as well as police officers or armed resource officers. Those are becoming quite commonplace. However,
ready for the next slide?
yes. Based on the research, based on a lot of the information that we have, one important approach is to focus on prevention rather than just reacting with the metal detectors, with armed resource officers. But before it ever gets to that point, before there's ever a student who escalates to the point of thinking about violence, how do we interrupt that? So if we can go on. One of the things that we talked about is creating a positive school climate. That is a critical element in preventing violence, is to teach students how to get along and help them learn how to communicate better with one another. Okay. One of the terms that has been used in the past is character education, but now we often talk about it as a positive school climate, or a positive social emotional learning environment, or positive SEL environment. And that is, if we build that positive environment, then we can reduce violence. One way of doing that is to have a peer mediation program. That's a very promising strategy based on research. And conflict resolution skills, according to Jeannie Asherman, conflict resolution skills like peer mediation should be included basically in school curriculum. So we should be looking at that at all schools. It should be a basic part of the curriculum for students, like English, math, and science. We should be teaching conflict resolution, or maybe through the method of peer mediation, which is most often what we're seeing at the lower levels. So I'm going to let Cindy talk.
Okay. Well, here is the crux of our presentation tonight. So what is this whole concept of peer mediation? Now, I would like to say peer mediation is not a panacea. It's not going to solve every issue. There are limits to peer mediation. We're not really going to go in that tonight. That's another webinar. But peer mediation really is a process and where you train students to facilitate a conversation between two students. So these two students are trained mediators, they're called neutrals because they don't take sides. And they bring together parties who have differences so that the parties can sit down and communicate in a very safe, non-threatening environment. Now, they may agree or they may agree to disagree. I know in my program, I have a very high rate of success when it comes to students who are willing to come to peer mediation. They say to me when we do the evaluation, why didn't we know about this before and why hadn't anybody told us about this? Why is this not part of our discipline code that somebody could tell us that I can come in and I could actually solve my own issue before it goes to the administrator, before it escalates where I'm suspended from school? So some of the things that we can address in peer mediation, and again, remember, lower level prevents it from getting higher, right? The continuum. But we address things such as name calling, rumors, isolation, destruction of property, he said, she said, you know, the start of drama and things like that. So peer mediation is very powerful. Now, research on peer mediation, what does the research say? It's very strong when it comes to helping create a positive school climate. So there are 4 pieces of research I just want to share very briefly. Peer mediation programs have been effective on helping students have better relationships. That is so powerful. If you can help students to be able to have better relationships, you've solved a lot of your problems. Through peer mediation, students learn that they can communicate with one another instead of fighting or retaliating physically. That's huge. Peer mediation has been found to effectively resolve conflict between students because you're actually teaching them life skills, and that reduces suspension and discipline referrals, which saves our school money because that's how we operate. It's based on our FTE monies that we get. And according to Johnson & Johnson, who are big researchers in peer mediation, 2 reasons for establishing peer mediation programs in school is really to create a safe learning environment where I can come to school and learn, and to help students develop socialization skills. So that's very powerful research. Now, there are 4 goals of peer mediation. To nurture empathy and respect between the disputants so they can understand where they're coming from. That doesn't mean that we're going to agree. It just means that we understand where each other's coming from. To improve and foster communication in a safe, neutral environment. To develop a process for problem solving. My goodness, we all need a process for problem solving. We're not born knowing how to do that. And then lastly is to create a process where disputants may choose either to reach an agreement or not reach an agreement based on their interest. So Darcy and I are going to talk, or Darcy's going to talk a little bit about the benefits of peer mediation for schools.
Okay, so I think we covered some of this, so I'm going to give you a chance to read through this, but for the students who are receiving the mediation, the students who are in conflict, some of the benefits are that it can lead to fewer fights, reduction in office referrals. We talked about that, just decreased rates of suspension. They're not in school, they're not accessing the instruction directly, they're losing out. And it's also been shown to help increase self-esteem and academic achievement. One of the things that has been noted in some of the research that I've looked at is we have kids who avoid school, have more days that they are sick and don't attend because they're having problems with other students or they're targets of bullying. And so they don't want to be in that environment. So they're missing out on academic instruction. They're not learning to communicate and resolve those problems, and those other students are not. And so it also can result in increased academic achievement if we resolve those problems and we have better attendance and we have students more engaged. For the peer mediator, there are also benefits. Mm-hmm. It increases their kaching, or their status with their peers. It teaches them communication skills. It teaches them how to resolve problems on their own. It teaches them higher level thinking skills. And they can use these skills not only when they're working to resolve problems for others, but they can use these skills for their own problems. If they are having problems at home, they might go home and negotiate some things with their parents or with some of their friends.
Absolutely.
Okay, so some of the students have identified some concerns, and that is that because of the scheduling, there's always the goal of interrupting the instructional process as little as possible. So mediation might take place during lunchtime. It might take place before or after school. It might take place during what is recess. And so one of the things that they talked about was maybe missing recess or other extracurricular activities, or having negative interactions with students who are not mediated. So you might have kids who come in who are having issues, and they may not be in the best mood, and they might be, expressing their anger, or they may see you and express some of their anger. And so those were two of the concerns.
Absolutely.
One of the critical pieces is determining whether or not a school really needs and can support a peer mediation program. Richard Cohen is one of the leading experts in the field. He's a pioneer. And so this is his list of what's important. And I'm just going to highlight a few things because we have a video that I really want you to see. So one thing that's critical is there enough conflict to warrant initiating the program? Are there going to be opportunities for the students to practice their mediation skills and to refer? If it's not something that they're going to be doing on a regular basis, and Cindy, you might talk about how regular you believe that to be, but if it's not something that's going to happen on a regular basis, it happens, maybe once every 2 or 3 months, and there's not really an ongoing involvement with peer mediation, then maybe you don't need a peer mediation, but maybe there are other peaceful conflict resolution, and we're going to talk about some other things later, but maybe you don't need a peer mediation. Did you want to input something, Cindy?
Well, I just know sometimes if your administration doesn't support it, they're not going to refer anything. So why even bother at that point? It does benefit the peer mediators, no doubt, and they can do other things. I've had that happen as well. So that's true.
Okay. Also, you have to have a cheerleader. You have to have someone on the team, on the staff, who really believes in the program and is going to advocate for it. You've got to have all the details. You have to very specific, which is how the OPMP program and other programs that are very detailed in the training for the trainers as well as the peer mediators is very structured and detailed. Student training, paperwork, procedures. You've got to have people out there sharing the program. This is what's available. This is what we do. These are the kinds of cases. We talked about not bullying, but maybe teasing. Maybe when you have students who are, as Kyle said, having inaccurate first impressions. And so they're what Kyle and Olivia talked about with the he said, she said. Okay, maybe somebody's taken something and hasn't returned it, or has a problem with, how they interact, or how they, I don't know if kids use the word diss anymore, how they diss each other, and maybe it's not intentional, but maybe culturally there's some different things. So, and also evaluation and feedback, making changes. Let's go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so there are some considerations, and just briefly, critical in making sure that you have a program that will be sustainable and effective is addressing the challenges of time, resources, and support for the program from the entire staff. And I'm going to go on.
Okay. Oh, here it goes. This is about our online peer mediation program. We have some students that shot this video and they wanted me to share it with you. So here we go.
Hi, my name is Cherish Dunn.
And my name is Dylan Steele.
And we're graduating peer mediators from Rockdale County Public Schools in Conyers, Georgia.
And as a graduating gift, we want to send you a message about this new and improved online mediation website.
This year, we were involved in a mediation program unlike no other, but we'll get to that in a minute.
First, what is peer mediation?
Peer mediation is a way for students to solve their own conflicts, but with the help of trained peers also. And in fact, it started in the 70s with community peer mediation.
Though it has not changed much since, it is rapidly evolving.
With over 3 million students in K-12 programs online, and with the advancement of social media, there's still a lot of room for conflict.
The answer is peermediationonline.org. In December of 2014, the JAMS Foundation funded our online peer mediation platform, a 2-year project initially managed by the Association for Conflict Resolution, and now managed by the National Association of Peer Program Professionals.
There are 4 goals of online peer mediation. The first one being resources. It provides extensive information on the website for anyone interested in peer mediation, like links, resources, best practices, standards, curriculums, media, all kinds of things.
And our second goal here is online training and basic peer mediation skills. This shows how middle and high schools can teach their students about basic peer mediation skills online.
Number 3 is online peer mediation skills and development. We teach middle and high school students how to practice their peer mediation skills by participating in online peer mediation simulations with other students and their trainer. And each simulation consists of 4 parts. Number 1 being mediation of a typical school-related conflict between 2 or more students. And number 2 is debriefing, to reflect on what happened in the mediation, what went well, what didn't, and why. Number 3 is video recording. And number 4 is online survey, to collect all the students' feedbacks and what they liked about the simulation, what they didn't, what needs improving. In 2015, we ran and video recorded 6 online mediation simulations. The results were very positive and students really liked it. This is what Aaron and Jada, 2 high school mediators, had to say. Online peer mediation conforms to a high schooler schedule. Mediation can happen anytime, anywhere. You really sharpen your skills because you're not in the same physical space. Online peer mediation offers awesome flexibility. Technology is an advantage. This is a way to get an issue solved quickly. This is our scope of practice.
And the last goal here is online peer mediation services. This shows how middle and high schools experienced in peer mediation can deliver online peer mediation services to schools that don't necessarily have a peer mediation platform. If you want to take your own programs and/or
Well, that was a little bit about our program. We talked about sustainability, and so we know that kids today love online. So if this is something that maybe you might want to get interested in, and we wanted to share that with you. Darcy?
Okay, so yeah, let's look at some things that you can do now, and that, and I'll let Cindy start.
Okay, so these are things I'm actually doing in my district. I run a peer leadership program online, by the way. And so one of the things that we did in the middle school is we actually did the Start with Hello program, where we train our peer leaders just to say hello to people. Not only we do it in the middle school, but we do it in the high school, and it has been powerful. We have helped people through mental health crises. People have learned to trust us. And so just really simple things besides having a peer mediation program can make a difference. We also train our students to say something. If they see something that doesn't seem right, we use the Sandy Hook Promise Say Something program to train students of what to do and who to go to.
Okay, and so nationally, you may have seen the commercial where the Ad Council and Apple have a new emoji, the I am a witness, and it's along the same lines of see something, say something, which the experts, and we talked about Professor Stephen Brock, are saying if students feel comfortable, if there's a positive school climate, if they know that adults care about them, they're more willing to say something before something tragic happens.
Absolutely.
So I am wearing my orange today. I don't know if you can see.
And I'm not. I'm a loser.
Well, no. But today is actually Unity Day for Pacers National Bullying Prevention Center. And so they said be bold about saying we don't tolerate bullying. We are united against bullying. We want people who are bullied to understand that they are not alone. They don't have to feel like they're alone because we're united. And then they have, if you go, and I put their
Yeah, the website over here on the side.
one there because they have different activities, Unity Tree and some other, they have some really good activities. It's not just today, but today was their day, which I thought it was
Absolutely.
today. Okay, so I don't think we have time to watch the full.
Okay.
But I'd like to look at a little bit of this. Burger King, back in November, October of 2017, they did this campaign. Public service announcement.
Hopefully. Oh. I don't think it's going to play. But if you go to YouTube and you put in the Burger King anti-bullying campaign, it is a really powerful video that shows how people reacted strongly to their burger being smashed and how they kind of relate it to bullying, which I think is very powerful.
And one of the things that they said is these are real customers. And so when they punched and, you know, pummeled their junior Whoppers, about 95% of the adults came up, brought them back to the counter, were shocked if they saw somebody, and then the manager would ask, did you bully that burger? Did you bully that junior Whopper? And they would say yes. And the customer was outraged. However, when they observed in the restaurant, junior high school, and that's the junior Whopper, junior high school students being bullied, only about 13% said anything or did anything. And so we really have to get people to say something. But
absolutely,
watch the video, and we can send that out to you.
Yes, we will certainly do that. Okay,
and so that's key with bullying. Talk and listen to children, talk and listen to the youth, and speak up. Call it out. And let them know that they don't have to suffer in silence. I talked to a student, he's a sixth grader, and last school year for 2017, 2018, he spent almost the entire year being bullied and didn't say anything to his mom, didn't say anything to his teachers because he feared it would only get worse.
Mm-hmm.
When he finally said something near the end of the year, his mom went in, she worked with the teachers, and they stopped it, and he felt much better. But he went through almost a whole year. And he also felt like he was the only one it was happening to.
All right. Mm. You ready to go to the next one, Darcy?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So a plan for the future, what we're recommending is let's not just look at metal detectors and police officers and student IDs. Let's look at some preventative measures that address the problems early on. Implement a peer mediation program in addition to those other measures as a comprehensive plan to prevent school violence. And then we have a suggestion for making a difference. Okay, so we challenge you to create a peer mediation or a conflict resolution superhero. And just about anybody can participate. Elementary school, middle and high school, college student or adult. And it can be a group, it can be individual. And so we will send out the link to you, but there is a link to a Google Doc where you can upload it online, and we ask you to do it. This is Conflict Resolution Anti-Bullying Month, so we ask you to do it by next Wednesday, October 31st. And then, you know that thing, right? It's a plan, it's a peer mediation superhero. So create your characters and share. We'll post the top 2 or 3 finalists online.
Absolutely.
Maybe do an online vote, but just online for everyone to see. And then we have resources that we will share, and the video is going to be posted. We're going to send them a link to the video.
Yep.
So the video will be posted. Their peer mediation, their anti-bullying, and then some of the references that we use.
Yeah, we have a lot. And the last thing before we see if anybody has any questions is that we also provide training. We have 2 options if you're interested in becoming a peer mediation coordinator. We have on the online option, which we can train. And then we have, of course, the in-person option. So if that's something that you think you'd like to really incorporate a peer mediation program in your school, reach out to us. We are more than willing to help you and talk to you about that and how we can make that happen. So I know we have a very short amount of time left, but does anybody have any questions or comments before we get off of our webinar tonight?
I have a comment. This is Olivia again.
Yeah, sure, Olivia.
I think that like at least every school should try to implement a peer mediation group, because even if you don't hear about the things that are going on, you never know what could be going on in someone's life, or just things that you don't happen to hear about. So you should at least try to have that program working and see, like, maybe the school might like it and maybe you might have it and maybe you might stop something terrible from happening, or who knows. I just think it's a really good resource for all students and it really can't hurt. So I think people might as well just try to get it in as many schools as possible.
Well, thank you, Olivia, for the vote of confidence there. We really appreciate that. And also just put in a kind of a tag for people that are thinking about becoming peer mediators. A lot of times, people that are peer mediators in high school can go on to be resident assistants in college, and they pay for your dorm. So there are perks that come along with that, leadership. I know I've worked with people who are in the workplace now that had peer mediation when they were in high school, and they are fantastic conflict resolvers. So lots of great things from that. And Olivia, we thank you and your mom for being on tonight, and thank you for everybody that's watched tonight. Darcy, do you have anything?
No, I just really appreciate that. And Olivia, I want to just endorse what you said. My goal, my platform is that there should be a peer mediation program in every school.
That's a great goal.
So thank you. I'm excited. I hope that some of you will participate in designing a superhero, because what we want going forward is we want people to remember. We want people to engage in peaceful conflict resolution. Unfortunately, today we had another example of how dangerous conflict can be. So we really want everyone to do whatever they can do.
Absolutely.
To reinforce peaceful conflict resolution and peer mediation.
Yes. Well, Darcy, I want to thank you for co-hosting with me tonight. And we will have a November webinar. I'm not sure exactly what the topic is. We have a couple of potential topics, and we'll end out the year talking about practical conflict skills that anybody can employ. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Cindy. Thanks, everybody.